Well, welcome everyone to this presentation, which is the annual joint presentation between CMOS and KCOR. And not only do we have CMOS and KCOR members participating, but because Arna is part of the National Arts Center Orchestra, we've also invited the friends of the National Arts Center Orchestra. And one very interesting note is that many members who are CMOS members and KCOR members are also friends of the National Arts Center Orchestra, which is very interesting. We also have the International Club of Rome represented here with Memphalia, which we are very happy who's joining us from South Africa. We have Anitra from the US, which is very nice as well. And we'll have some Canadense people joining us as well, who are people who are whose mission is to work on getting a botanical garden for Canada and for working at the experimental farm, but they're also, one of their missions is also climate change. So they were very interested in joining us for this. I also want to point out that Anne McMillan, with whom I've worked for 6 years at finding presenters for this annual meeting, is with us as well. And she will be thanking Arna at the end for her presentation after the question and answers. I'd like to say thank you to Arna for accepting to do this. You've read her bio, and one of the things that was of great interest to me was when she was presented to us at the board meeting of FNACO, one of the statements that she made was that she was really concerned about climate change. And my ears perked up. I was so happy to hear this. She said she'd like to somehow in her work try to do something about this. And as you've read, she's the director of the Canadian Arts Center Orchestra. And when she was in Iceland, she was also the managing director for the Iceland Symphony Orchestra. That's where she started off. She's a professional flutist. And she, like all musicians, you have a second instrument, and she plays the piano as well. And I guess there's some family members who are also musicians, and one of her cousins has won an Oscar for the background music to The Joker. I'm sure some of you are familiar with. So she has lived in, Arna has lived in Iceland and in England. She's done some postgraduate work in England. And we are very happy to have her now in Canada as managing director for the National Arts Center Orchestra. And thank you for joining us. So I'll ask Arna to take over.
Well, thank you, Madeleine, and it's great to be here with you all. So, you know, and giving me this opportunity. And when Madeleine first approached me to speak to your distinct membership at the Canadian Association for the Club of Rome and the Canadian Meteorological and Oceanographic Society, I had to practice this one, I tell you. That was hard, harder than my last name, I tell you, for sure. She, you know, like Madeleine was saying, she heard me speak at a board meeting and about my idea for a festival, music festival, with a focus on the climate crisis. And I was only a few months into my job as the managing director of the NAC Orchestra, and having just moved from Iceland, where I'd previously worked. For 18 years, I started as a flautist. I moved into the management in 2007. As an orchestra manager, and then became the managing director in 2013. I hope you can hear me. Please let me know if there are any issues with the internet. Sometimes, you know, you're not always aware. So, and just to give you a little sort of background, you know, so living in Iceland you are very close to nature and its strong forces. You feel it, you see it with high mountains, winds, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, high seas, bright light, and dark, long winters. And although we do not have these extreme in temperature like here in Canada, as it rarely gets below -10 degrees or above 15 plus in the summer, the force of nature is very real to us. But the reason for the temperate climate is that we have the Gulf Stream coming around the island. So that's why we don't have this extreme in temperature. But we have certainly felt this in the recent years, that that this force and these storms are getting more fierce. So every year we have many rescue operations to help people in need when trapped on mountains or out on sea because of sudden changes in weather. And we've just seen that there's been more increase in these violent storms, and they've become more frequent. And we're being told by scientists that this is because of the climate change. So I think, this is to say that, as I say, it's something that I am experiencing really strongly. And we're also seeing it. So with our own eyes, our beautiful glaciers are melting. And a year ago, our Prime Minister, Katrín Jakobsdóttir, held a memorial service for the first glacier to disappear, becoming just another mountain. The glacier's name is Ok, or OK, which is a bit ironic because, of course, it's far from being okay, but it has a different meaning in Icelandic. And here you can see the letter to the future. It says, Ok is the first Icelandic glacier to lose the status as a glacier in September. Oh, no, I'm not seeing this properly. Wait, I have to do this with my. In 200 years, all our glaciers are expected to follow the same path. This monument is to acknowledge that we know what is happening and what needs to be done. Only you know if we did it. So we'll see if we can change the course. But it's not just the force of nature that is sort of something to be reckoned with in Iceland. It's also, music is another strong force. And for centuries, Iceland was the poorest nation in Europe. And it was only after our fishing industry became industrialized and we got our independence from the Danes that our economy started to improve just after the Second World War. Until then, very little, we didn't even have many instruments. I mean, there was just not a lot to build on. And it seems like we were just so hungry for music that it was almost like an explosive force. And suddenly we had music schools in every tiny little fishing village around the island, and everyone was singing in a choir. And we founded a music conservatory, and in 1950, the Iceland Symphony Orchestra. And at that time, the population of Reykjavik was only 50,000 people. So it just shows, still how important we felt that it was, we had a symphony orchestra and that we could share this heritage that we share with the whole world, the musical heritage. So we can also experience the music from Beethoven or Brahms, or that is, at the core of this. And this is just to sort of give you a bit of an idea about my background and where I'm coming from. And I started myself to play my flute when I was 10. And that eventually took me on my life's journey. First, I went to study in the US, in Indiana University, in Bloomington. And then I followed my flute professor to Manchester in England. And I only moved back 10 years later when I won an audition for the second flute position with the Iceland Symphony. And now I'm here in Canada, still in the music business and making music, but in a slightly different way, not with my flute, but with the orchestra. But it was interesting when I joined the management side of the business and started going to international conferences. But there was a lot of talk about graying audiences and declining subscriptions. And many conferences had themes about how we as an art form could stay relevant and attract new audiences, particularly as with the culture ecosystem, and all the challenges, because there's just such fierce competition with people's time. There's so much on offer. And there's also the worry that there's less and less reception for our music out there. And just because people are not really familiar with the symphonic repertoire. So here is the burning question that my colleagues and I have been asking for some time. How can a symphonic orchestra that is so heavily rooted in our cultural heritage, mostly performing repertoire and music from the past, be relevant and deal with current issues of today? So this is all to explain why, when I met Madeleine and was planning a music festival with a focus on the climate crisis, I wanted to find a way for the orchestra to be a part of the conversation and dialogue about the climate. I wanted us to find a way for us and our audience to understand what is happening to our planet on an emotional level. I wanted us to explore and showcase the music and the art that is dealing with this topic, in the hope that this might help people to open their eyes, help us make the necessary changes needed in order to save the planet. But then came COVID. And with COVID, the lives of all of us were hit hard and devastating for some. Many have lost loved ones and many have lost their jobs. And the performing arts have been hit particularly hard. So hard that it's actually heartbreaking to see the effect. With canceled seasons all over, closed concert halls, silenced orchestras, layoffs and shattered dreams, it almost feels like a bomb has hit us. The buildings, the concert halls are still standing, but they are like ruins, dark and cold, and tell us stories of past glories and music. And we who are in the business of bringing people together in large number for shared experience are suddenly faced with the reality that what we do is a health hazard. We know that people need us, maybe more than ever, but we have very little means in meeting them except through digital medium, which just isn't the same. And if we were to put on a public symphonic concert now, we would actually be risking people's lives. So for me, or for all of us, this is just completely surreal. I have managed an orchestra in crisis before, when the economy collapsed in Iceland in 2008. But that was completely different. Then we actually saw a huge increase in attendance and proved how important the arts and music are to people when in need, and what a big part they play in the healing process. So, as I'm sure you can hear, I'm truly worried for the future of the performing arts. Our world has been turned upside down, and if there was ever a worry for our sector, it certainly is now. No one is really expecting us to come out of this unscathed, and the world will not look the same. Surveys are showing that at least 30% of our audience is saying that they will be hesitant coming back, even after there is a vaccine. And most of us in the business are trying to invent some kind of a hybrid model, being both digital as well as physical. And we all knew that the digital future was coming, but we're a bit late to the game and we're kind of building from scratch. And because of COVID, it feels like our future is very fragile. And it truly is a matter of survival for the art form. So, how will we survive? Well, I think it's fair to say that it depends on the support we get from our communities and our authorities. And for us who have support, the only way to stay alive, in my mind, is to really step into the 21st century and respond to our current situation. We cannot just continue to play the same repertoire like nothing has happened. Although the music of Beethoven and Brahms, the masters, and other great composers embody some of the best of human creation in an emotional and magical language we all can understand, times have changed. Living, breathing organizations that seek support from their community need to represent the community that they're a part of. They need to reflect it. And this is the exact reason, and they need to take part and be a part of the dialogue. And this is the exact reason why I have, in my work previously with the Iceland Symphony, and when I came over here, I've always been an advocate for women composers and conductors. I felt it was wrong that their creative voices were being excluded in our programming, and I felt it was important, as more than half of the audience were women, that these women could reflect themselves in our programming. I also felt it was smart business, because women are the majority of ticket buyers to cultural events. Coming to Canada, I realized that the issue of representation was quite a bit more complicated than in Iceland, because of how diverse Canada truly is, and because of issues around systemic racism, exclusion of indigenous voices and other minorities. So, to respond to these times of disruption, we at the NAC Orchestra decided to make use of the time to truly explore new ways of existing in terms of the music we perform, who we choose as our artistic partners, and how we use the digital medium to reach our audience and expand the experience. We shifted our focus to the future. We have already shown this in our first 3 NAC live concerts that have been streamed live from Southam Hall, where we performed works by women composers, composers of color, and showcasing young Canadian soloists featured on the CBC list of 30 under 30 of talented young musicians, Canadian young musicians. In our first concert, we had a locked-in audience of 2,000 people staying with us for almost the whole time, and an overwhelming positive response and praise. And I have to say that this response is very much a part of and in line with the NAC new 3-year strategic plan called The Next Act, where we put forward a vision for how the NAC can support the recovery of the performing arts sector in Canada by being inclusive, generous, engaging, creative, and sustainable. So here's a quote from Arts Files critic Natasha Gauthier for our NAC live stream concert. It would appear that this shift to online performance has spurred the orchestra into choosing more diverse, socially relevant, and musically exciting fare. And we have got, I have to say the response has been really, really positive. So although the COVID crisis moved this shift of focus along more quickly than anticipated, we already knew that this was the direction we wanted to head towards. This season's theme, the one that got canceled, was supposed to be about dialogue. We had put together an interesting offer for our audience that we hoped would spur a dialogue around important topics, difficult topics, such as truth in our times, race and gender issues, even domestic violence. We were just about to press send on the button to launch the season when Canada went into lockdown on Friday, the 13th of March. So this season never saw its light. Looking ahead, and with our vision for creating a platform for a dialogue and being relevant to the social discussion, we are hoping to be able to present a music festival we call Ideas of North, with a focus on the climate crisis in the fall of 2022. This will be a part of a Nordic initiative called Nordic Bridges, that the Nordic Council is supporting, and the Harbourfront Centre in Toronto is leading here in Canada. As I said in the beginning of my talk, for us coming from the North, the climate crises are very real. We are seeing and feeling the effect. And actually, the same is true all over the world. Some say that, COVID is one example. And I recently heard a presentation by an insurance broker explaining how the climate crisis is impacting that sector. And she said, if anyone is saying that the climate crisis is not happening, they should look at the increased numbers in claims because of natural disasters. It is happening. So we are hoping that the Ideas of North Festival will become a meeting point of music, arts, and science. And just before the lockdown, I had a meeting with heads of the Museum of Nature here in Ottawa to see if they would be interested in partnering. And we hope to continue this conversation when things start to open up and our organizations know where they stand in terms of funding. Because as I'm sure you all understand, that all of what I'm saying here in terms of my hopes for this festival is dependent on the funding. And so no guarantee, it's a vision, it's an aspiration, and it's my dream for us, but hoping that we will be able to find the funds. So Angela Rawlings, a Canadian poet and editor and interdisciplinary artist who uses many spectacular languages for material, will be our co-curator for this festival. She lives or loves, as she says herself, in Iceland, but recently completed her PhD from the University of Glasgow on how to perform geochronology in the Anthropocene. Angela is really the embodiment of what we are hoping for the festival. She's a scientist that uses her art as a means for her research, or the opposite, researches her art with her scientific tools, expanding our ways of thinking, like all real art does, unlike science. So here you can see a violin that she drowned in the sea, and it's work in progress. And through Angela, I'm discovering many interesting Canadian artists that have been focusing on the environment in their art. She has, for instance, introduced me to Agneta Dijk, an acclaimed Canadian artist known internationally for her sculptural collaborations with live honeybees and her transformation of domestic objects and processes. She actually talks about the bees being her collaborators, which I think is quite beautiful. And Dijk places objects into beehives and allows insects to build honeycomb on the objects, sometimes over the course of years. Dijk has collaborated with beekeepers and entomologists in making her sculptures. And in addition to appreciating the beauty of the honeycomb, Dijk is interested in environmental issues, specifically the power of the small and in interspecies communication. Her research asks questions about the ramification all living beings would experience should honeybees disappear from Earth. Also, the legendary R. Murray Schafer, the Canadian composer, writer, music educator, and environmentalist, best known for his World Soundscape project, which deals with acoustic ecology, and his book, The Tuning of the World. Very interesting composer. And another composer. We're also hoping to perform works by my famous and amazing cousin that Madeleine spoke about earlier, that I used to babysit when she was little, the Emmy, Grammy, Golden Globe, and last year's Oscar winning composer Hildur Guðnadóttir. She is the first woman ever to win Oscar for Best Dramatic Score to the music of the film Joker. However, she got an Emmy and a Grammy and many other prizes for her music to the HBO mini TV series Chernobyl. And to tell you a little bit about her approach when writing the music to Chernobyl, Hildur actually went to Chernobyl with her score producer, slipping into hazmat suits. They recorded for hours to pick up the ambient noise from the power plant. She wanted the power plant and the radiation to be a voice in itself. In her own words, I wanted to understand the feeling of what must have gone through people's heads as they were trying to navigate through that disaster. It is incredibly effective. Anyone listening to this music must agree that she succeeded in making it sound radioactive. You can feel this music in your bones and sense the underlying threat to the people's lives. So that's the power of music. You feel it, you internalize it, you empathize, and it may help you to understand the world in a different way. And that's the true reason for the arts, I believe. The arts are like our digestion system. First, we need the science to dig out and bring us the facts and the data. But because it can sometimes be hard to digest and really understand, the arts take over. Artistic thinkers and creative minds use the facts to inspire their art, music, and stories so that we can internalize the facts and understand on an emotional level. And not until this happens can we truly expect any real change. And this is exactly why the arts and artists are so important to our societies. This is also why it is my firm belief that scientists and artists should work more closely together, particularly now when we need to deliver this urgent message of change. We need to find a way to create space and platforms for cross-disciplinary conversations and dialogue and see if together we can reach further. With a greater understanding of the actual situation, we have a better chance of dealing with the crisis ahead, find ways to make the necessary changes in our ways of being, and possibly create a new and more sustainable path going forward. That would be my hope for the future, at least. So I had been thinking of playing you some music and share some examples with you, from, music that has inspired me and I feel is dealing with this topic, but I never really trust the technology on Zoom. So instead, I'm just going to show you a poem by Angela Rawlings that I find inspiring, and which doesn't need any technical device. It only needs your inner ear and some imagination. So here it comes. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very, very much, Arna. That was wonderful and a lot of food for thought. And you really did a very good job of showing where the arts and science and social issues connect. It's very, very relevant to everything we're living in our society right now. And as I mentioned before, especially with KCOR, they really do take an interdisciplinary approach to looking at world issues. So thank you so much for this. And now we'll go on to questions. I'll look and see. There is a question from Art Hunter.
Yes,
Art?
Arna, listening to your presentation, I was thinking of what is happening to the other major cultural centers around the world, like Paris, New York, London, Frankfurt, Beijing, Tokyo, etc. How are they surviving, and what are their plans that you know of? And is there anything that we can use in Canada to assist in this struggle that you're facing?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question, and very, like I said earlier, it's been actually quite shocking to see the effect of this, and also to realize and see the different the support, because there are different support for arts and culture in, for instance, Europe than, for instance, in North America. And you can see the difference also in the Nordic countries compared to, and what has been sort of worrying me is to see the effect of COVID and all these lockdowns, particularly on cities like London and New York, because these cities have been like, they've been, you know, that's where they've been the, how do you say, the central, the focal points of, you know, so much of what's happening in the arts. And they've been hit so bad by this, and their organization are really struggling, and you know, as looking at sort of the big picture for the whole world, it feels like that for these cities to be silenced in this way is really, it feels really, yeah, it saddens me, and I worry about that for sure. We, you know, of course, it's the spread of the virus makes it so that, you know, it depends where they are in the waves, you know, how it's affecting them at the moment. But it seems to be really, you know, most like in Europe, here in North America, you know, but it's maybe more in Asia that they are sort of opening up, being able to do concerts. But it's hard.
Jeff Passmore has a comment.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Arna, for that presentation. You know, it's so nice to have a presentation from someone and on a topic that is outside our normal realm of the kind of things that we think about on a daily basis, those of us who work in climate change and, in my own case, in the bioeconomy. One interesting piece of good news, it just so happened I was had a meeting today, not wearing a mask and all the rest of it, but coming home on the radio, and I don't remember the chap's name, but he was a fellow who writes musical scores for movies. And he said, actually, COVID has been good for me in the sense that I've rediscovered my love of music. He said, all of a sudden with the lockdown, my calendar was open. And then I suddenly could have time to listen to music again. And so and apparently there's some app, I don't even know what it was, but there's an app that you can get that shows every radio station in the world, every little green dot you click on, and you can listen to what that radio station is playing. And he's discovered stations all over the world that he likes to listen to their music. So maybe there's a little bit of good news here in that rather than less interest in music, more of us have some more time to actually listen to music and develop an appreciation, which doesn't mean we're going to go to live events, of course, yet, like you have discussed. One other comment he made, which you alluded to, which is that he likes to write music, imagine this, to a soundtrack to a movie without having seen the film. And then if the producer of the film likes it, so be it. But he said, if you're watching a movie and turn down the volume, so all you can see is the action, and then play your own music in the background, different records or whatever, and it elicits a completely different emotional response, which again is, you were alluding to the emotional response of music. So if you're listening to different music to the same visuals, you'll have a different emotional response. Anyway, back to climate change and your comments about Iceland. Yes, and you're warmed by the Gulf Stream, so let's hope we can ensure the future of Iceland so that the Gulf Stream doesn't move south, and all of a sudden you are going to have an uninhabitable island there. Sorry, no question, just general comments, and I very much appreciated your presentation, and give us a little bit of respite from what we normally think about.
Thank you, Jeff. But yeah, you're right about the Gulf Stream. We need that up in Iceland, so please, yes, keep it coming.
Yeah.
That's us in Florida who are sending that to you with love.
Great, thank you.
Ken McKinley had a comment for everyone. Did you want to say it, Ken?
Sure. Hi, Arna.
Hi.
Just want to thank you and say how impressed I've been with the NAC, how you've adapted to the changes imposed due to COVID-19, plus the other initiatives that the NAC have undertaken for climate change, like having the bees and that, and the compostables.
Yeah, that's just so beautiful. I love the bees up on our roof, you know. Apparently they didn't survive the first year, but, you know, they're gonna work on that. So, you know, they'll be there, you know, when we are back, you know.
Great. Zach, I see that you wanted Art's question repeated, but did you understand from Art's response what you wanted? From Arna's response to Art's question?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Okay.
I would understand her response a lot better if I knew what the question was. Can you repeat it?
Okay, Art, can you repeat your question to Arna?
Yeah, my question was directed at the rest of the cultural centers around the globe. In particular, I mentioned New York, London, Beijing, Frankfurt, Tokyo, Paris. You know, to me, the pandemic has a terrible reach around the globe, as will a lot of the climate change that is still to hit us and hit us hard. And I was quite happy with Arna's response. It's recognized as a major issue.
Right. Okay. We'll move on to
Thank you.
We'll move on to Edna Manning.
There,
Edna.
hi, that was wonderful. And I think it illustrates to us how very important the cultural things that we often forget about are to our livelihood. And a point I'm trying to make is that in the past, things like NAC and others depend immensely on private payment. They get some government support, but so much of art is paid for by the rich people who like it. And I'm coming to the conclusion that it could well be seen as a common property resource, because once it's out the door, you kind of lose control of how it's used in any event. Will the way in which art and culture and music and other things are funded change as a result of COVID or as a result of other crises like climate change? Can we make it easier to fund this common property resource for humanity? And that's not an easy question to answer, but I think it's worth getting our folks here to try and debate.
And thank you for that. And I think that's absolutely the you know, where we need, this needs to be addressed. And this is what I'm saying, looking, you know, to, you know, for instance, Germany or the Nordic countries where you have more support from the state or the government. You know, they are basically governmentally funded and just, you know, and highly valued, just like you would value your education system or your healthcare system. It's just pillar underneath, you know, underneath our foundations and where we all stand on. And it's just sort of to maybe shift that understanding or the way we you know, because as I say, they have this role for us. They are there to deal with the issues so we can understand and we can then have hope for action. But you know, because I think for many of us, and particularly, I mean, for us who are laymen and, you know, don't have this scientific knowledge, for us just to hear the you know, we can't really grasp it. It's just too vast. It's just too big. But when you put it in maybe like, you know, my cousin did with the Chernobyl music, is, you know, suddenly you just can feel this, you know, in your bones, you know, because he manages to put that in her music in that way. That, you know, and the same for all other issues. And that's of course the same for happiness or same for love, or, you know, it's this, and that's what, you know, the proof that, you know, there's this scientific proof that what music actually does to, when we experience it together, this shared experience, it actually, we start to sync, our heartbeats, our, you know, bodies start to sort of be in the same, you know, syncing. and that creates an empathetic bond between us, and that is just so beautiful, and that is a huge role of music in our societies, you know.
Well, these events are causing us to reevaluate what we really value.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next question is from Satya Brink. Satya, would you ask your question?
Thank you. I know that the NACO has been very active working with youth, but it's mainly with training their musical skills. And I'd like to know how you can work with youth to involve them in the environmental side also, because they're the ones who are going to be living when we are gone and facing up to the changes in climate. So it seems like a natural fit that there can be a good tie between environment and expression through music to solve those or work with those issues.
No, absolutely. That is the key, you know, going forward is how we you know, work with youth, you know, on this. For sure, they are our future, and I, you know, so just sort of we very much, you know, and if we manage to get this festival going and have the funds for this, it will have a focus on the youth. Absolutely, that's going to be one of our sort of very strong focal point. But and just to give you a little bit of a, so we had actually met with we were working with a school. Can't remember the name of the school, but this is so we had like a whole class with us for a day, and we actually asked them to program a festival, music festival for climate change, you know. So we were actually on the climate crisis, and what were the topics that they would want us to really address, and it was a very fruitful and very interesting conversation and dialogue that we had with these youngsters. So absolutely, that will for sure be part of us going forward, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ted has another comment, another question. Did you want to ask that one as well? It's related to the one before.
No, it is directly related, but I think that Manthella had a comment back on what we were just talking about. So maybe I can concede to her for the next round.
Okay. All right.
Well, thank you very much. I have to say, this is fantastic. You have demonstrated that we are best when we use all of our senses to listen and to communicate. And this is exactly what we in the Club of Rome explorations of emerging new civilization is about. It's about learning anew how to be human in the way our ancient ancestors were human and able to do what you're talking about, to feel the music and to feel the energy that connects them. So even without saying a word, there is a very strong flow of communication. And I can't tell you how excited I am about what you're trying to do and how we in the Club of Rome should be bolder in this exploration of learning how to live in this liminal space, this in between, this threshold, rather than rush into the compartments that we use, science, art, this. And so I just want to invite every one of you here to be really enthused by this, to explore more deeply and challenge. We should be challenging one another in this exploration. And in fact, when you think about it, the Club of Rome started with that Limits to Growth report, but towards the end of his life, Aurelio Piche, our founder, was really worried about these issues, this what he called the human gap, this or the human element that we don't really emphasize as much as you have now today, again, opened our eyes to. That if we open our eyes and ears and bodies and feelings to the human element, it's much easier to get the energy to address all of the challenges, whether it's COVID or climate in other forms. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you, Pamela. That is so beautiful. Thank you.
The next point was from Carlos and to Ted, and he says, let's declare a universal right to beauty, which I totally endorse. And then John Legg, you said preceding message. Did you have any other comment? John? No, okay. We'll move on to Helen Joseph. She said, very interesting presentation and great food for thought. And Anata Kumar would like to ask a question about acoustic ecology.
And I know that's the password I was putting in.
So thank you so much, Arna, and thank you, Madeline. Also friends Mampela and Carlos, co-present here. Yeah. So your reference to acoustic ecology is very deep, and I just wanted to request you to expand a bit and relate it also the very ecological dimension. And as Mampela was saying, that how do we develop our senses, you know, and if we can relate it to Gregory Bateson's steps to an ecology of mind, and that acoustic ecology, what is the ethical dimension? Listening as a part of acoustic ecology, and that is a very ethical kind of imperative. So I wish to request you to explore the ethics and aesthetics of acoustic ecology as part of an interconnected, wider sense of ecology.
Yeah, that's quite a question. So if this sort of, this is a, you know, this was a reference to Murphy, you know, the Schaefer, the composer. So he had this, I don't know his music in detail, but he is an extraordinary entrepreneur, you know, in his way of thinking, and he was worried about all the sound around us, you know, all the noises, all the noise that, you know, with all this noise pollution, that was going to affect us. So that's why he actually wanted to sort of get us aware that how much that was having an impact on us. And that's why his, you know, that's where his sound works and you know, deal with this a lot. So I don't think really I have a great answer to your question, but just that like you're talking about these senses, you know, and this how we are moved by this. And I find it really interesting. There are studies about empathy, for instance, and studies with empathy that showed that if, for instance, they did this experiment on a toddler, a 2-year-old. So they had the researcher sitting in front of, you know, opposite the toddler who was sitting with his parent, and they were bouncing on like bouncing balls. And if they bounced like not in sync, not in rhythm, and the researcher dropped his pan, the child would not take any notice. But if they were bouncing in rhythm, in sync together, the child would pick up the pan and give it to the researcher. So it shows that this empathetic bond is like when we are like in this movement together, and that's why shared experience, shared, and this is of course why it's so hard to, you know, and painful and heartbreaking that we now know that people are, you know, grieving. They've lost their relatives, and they can't, I mean, it's even hard to have, you know, funeral services. And it's hard to come together, and it's a, you know, it's really sad to think about that. And so I referred to a little bit when I was in Iceland as a managing director of the Iceland Symphony, when we went through the collapse of the economy 2008. That was a very traumatic experience for Icelandic people. We had our prime minister come on TV saying, you know, talking about the banks going bankrupt, or, you know, and he was a little bit unclear, and we didn't really understand what he was talking about. But he, in the end of his speech, he said, "God bless Iceland." And I know that that's a phrase that they use a lot in US, but we never use that phrase. So we were thinking, my God, there's something serious happening here. And we went through, you know, a very difficult time, just as a nation in many ways. And we grieved, and it was very uncertain times, but we saw, you know, we in the arts and culture, we saw huge increase in attendance because, and what we saw also, what we experienced is that the concerts, the way people listened, that they were there because they needed to come together, and the music was helping people to get in touch with their own emotions and helping them to go through the emotions and in a shared experience. And it was a very powerful and very, you know, important time in my life to understand really truly the importance of what we do. So I don't know, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it's just to show the importance of this in our lives.
Thank you so much, Arna. Thank you.
The next is Bill Pugsley. He has a question about NACO's approach to the Arctic.
Thank you, Madeline. And thank you, Arna, for, as I think Keith Passmore said, an unusual and welcome break from the normal technical stuff that we normally look at. But my question is about how is the NAC approaching the Arctic? And under the topic of climate change, the COVID thing will be forgotten in 2 years, but climate change will be going on and increasing over the next decade or more. And your flagging of the first glacier to melt in Iceland was an example of that. And I'm just wondering, in general, what is the NAC thinking about in terms of delivering their music to the Arctic, which is undergoing changes at 3 times the rate that we are in the South? On the one hand, in a more general context, there is a long-standing group of people called the Arctic Council, which is made up of Scandinavian countries and the US and Canada. And I wondered if you know if there is a role for culture and music in what they are planning for the future, again, with climate change in the background.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think that should certainly be a part of their, you know, strategy, you know, because you know, speaking to you here now, because this is what I feel. I really, truly think we should collaborate more, because that would help us, you know, all of us to get that message across, you know, more powerful, in a more powerful way. What was the NAC doing? Are you talking about if we are going to go, you know,
well,
out and perform?
As an example, the Friends of the National Arts Center Orchestra delivered musical instruments to children in Baffin Island, in Inuit. I know, I'm quite aware that the NAC is not just the best place to listen to music in Ottawa, but it is a national outward-looking organization. And so I wondered what role are you thinking of playing in the Arctic, the NAC and the NAC Orchestra?
I hope we will play keep playing an important role. I know, you know, before my time, they had gone on, you know, very extensive tour that they did. Can't remember exact year, was it 2000 and that was 2 or 3 years before I joined. And that's, you know, important, but also, you know, we have quite, you know, we work quite a lot on programming online activities now. So we are really focusing on that. So we have, you know, Arts Alive, where we are creating content for teachers or for communities to be able to use in their, you know, in their teaching. And so we're developing, and I'm just so fortunate. I feel I'm so fortunate to be a part of this amazing team that the NAC has, with this great vision for how it can support the sector of the whole, Canada as a whole. And so we will certainly be working on that. You know, that would be at the front of our minds. But I don't really, yeah.
I was thinking of the role of the Indigenous Peoples Program, part of the NAC, and what linkages there are between the orchestra and that. Or to put it another way, are there moves afoot to have Inuit music composers become a part of the program?
Absolutely, absolutely. No, for sure. And, you know, this is part of this, you know, bringing diverse voices to the stages of NAC and us, the orchestra, collaborating with composers from, you know, different backgrounds. And that's so important. And what I'm actually getting in response to what we've been programming in our just the past 3 concerts that we've been able to stream live is exactly, you know, these people are so excited to be learning and hearing something new. And so, you know, such great music from, you know, so I think definitely we are widening our horizon and we are bringing new exciting voices, you know, with us onto the stage.
Thank you.
Vic Buxton had a question. Vic?
Yes, I'm just unmuting myself. I guess what my concern too is the relationship between music, the pandemic, and mental health issues. What really concerns me is it's been known for many years that music is uplifting and is really a medicine for achieving recovery from many mental health issues. And I wondered if the NAC is the mechanism for outreach all across the country and across the world, in, you know, in many ways. The problem is affordability. How do the people that need it the most access it? And is it possible, for example, if the NAC is concerned about future funding, to stream actual NAC events and request donations so the very rich that are coming there will put in more, the poor people will put in maybe a little less. But I think once people learn to appreciate it, they're going to come forward. Has the NAC thought about an outreach mechanism like this through Zoom or some other form for streaming?
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, and so with our, you know, of course, you know, we are sort of paving a new path in this digital kind of existence, you know, and so now we're actually offering our concerts live streamed for free. So you can watch it, but we are hoping that, you know, we will develop some kind of a hybrid model where you know, exactly like you are saying, we can offer this for, you know, donations or, you know, reach further. So, so that will certainly be a part of our lives, whether people, you know, can come in, you know, and attend in person a concert, or if they can access it through, you know, maybe for less money online. So it's going to be something to explore. And this is what we're dealing with just now. So actually our next concert will have a donation button where you can, you know, if you feel like it, you want to donate and you feel like, you know, it's important to support this initiative, you can. And then of course, depending on your means. So, you know, we are certainly in the sort of early stages of developing this, but it's very, I mean, it was all brought on us very, very quickly, and we just had to pivot, and we had to. But to your point about the power of music in, you know, for mental health, I mean, it's just, it such a powerful tool. And I don't know if you've, I'm sure many of you have seen, for instance, patients suffering from Alzheimer's, and they've completely forgotten their own name. They don't know their family, but you play a song and they come alive. Or they can even, you put them in front of a instrument that they played and they can play that, and so they still have that musical memory. They say it's the last thing to go. So it's so interesting that, and it just, again, another proof of the importance of this.
But there's one other mechanism, and that we could have the NAC link each event to one of our crisis concerns. Climate change is an example, or killing of the oceans, or any specific event with a very short theme explanation, and then you go into your orchestral review, That would link the two and could help.
Absolutely. There are certainly ways to do that, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, in so many ways, this digital reality now is really, it's giving us new opportunities in so many ways. And, and we're figuring out, and I'm sure we're going to be able to invent different ways of disseminating our music and reaching, and giving a different context to what we're doing.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Okay, next person is Michel de Gastin. I don't know if you're still there, but you talked about the wonderful presentation and you had a question and you were asking Memphilia to comment on it as well. So could you please state your question?
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so Dr. Ramfeli actually responded very well a minute ago. I have a small association in Paris called Musique Universelle Arc-en-Ciel, and we're very much focused on humanistic education, which for us includes intercultural dialogue and human dignity issues, and very much inspired by the UNESCO Jazz Day, which was created in 2012 with UNESCO by Herbie Hancock. We do not limit ourselves to jazz, but we want to explore how music and all the arts can help us become more human. And what Dr. Ramfeli said about rediscovering what as a the ancient ability that we have still in us somewhere, but certainly in the West, I think we've lost it more and more, which is related to empathy, like Arna, no.
Yes.
Arna, what you said a minute ago touched me immensely. What you said about the Chernobyl touched me immensely. All of that. So I know that there's ways to not only heal, like you just said, like music therapy, but the synchronization. I mean, we are vibrating, and music is vibration, and like the synchronicity of the two people bouncing. That was just an amazing example. And so we're searching every possible way to do that and to build bridges between, peoples who, the differences which create conflict because of fear and whatever other reasons, how to overcome that. Like Leonardo da Vinci taught us, everything is related. So this idea of science and music and the arts and everything, Da Vinci 500 years ago, he understood that, right? So it's just so exciting, and I'm so grateful to the Club of Rome for having given me this opportunity to listen to you and connect to all of you, and look forward to collaborations.
Thank you. And then finally we have Marilyn. Marilyn, would you want to? She's coming.
She has left the conference.
Oh, okay. All right. And I think...
I had another comment.
Yes, yes, I was just looking for that. Did you want to ask it, Jeff, or say it?
Well, you mentioned at least on 2 occasions shared experience, and as a student of politics, this is a very profound concept because one of the reasons when you study the literature for so much polarization and partisanship in today's world is that we don't have common cultural touchstones, and music certainly can be that. So when you talk about shared experience, keep in your mind the fact that it can be a cultural touchstone for so many people, and social media is one of the ways that we can create that cultural touchstone. I mean, social media right now actually is having, at least in some people's view, the opposite effect, that nobody, like when I was a kid growing up, there were only two TV stations. So, you know, everybody talked about the same thing. Now, nobody looks at the same stuff. So I just want you to use that concept of cultural touchstones and shared experiences as part of your NAC lobbying efforts when you need government funding.
No, I think that's absolutely that. And I mean, I think what has been so, you know, so we had a concert last Saturday, and then we were allowed 50 people in the hall, in Southam Hall, for the first time. So for the first time in what, 8 months, the musicians were actually performing for an audience. And even though it was only 50 people, it made all the difference. And it was so interesting to see and speak to the musicians afterwards. I mean, they had tears in their eyes. It was just, it made because it's all about, and sometimes I don't think, you know, audience actually realize what they play such a big part in creating that moment that we are, you know, you have the artist or the musician on stage, you have the audience out in the auditorium, but together they create this moment. And if you don't have that meeting point, it's not the same. It's not the same, not at all, because, you know, the energy. So that's why you have, like in theater, you know, they say that, you know, there's a difference between the audience on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday or Saturday, you know, because it's a different weekday, and, you know, people are in a different kind of frame of mind. And it makes it different for the actors, because they react to, you know, the energy from the audience. And the same for a concert, you know, audience, the symphonic audience, is the way people listen. You know, if you have this kind of concentration in the hall, it just creates, you know, an elevated concentration for the musicians, and they perform better. So the concentration in the hall, listening, creates that response from the musician, and it's very interesting. So of course, this is what is so, and that's what I'm talking about for this kind of shared experience, you know, in some ways. But I get your point, you know, completely about this, you know, and this is what I think what has worried us in the symphonic world is that, like you say, now, you know, people are, before, you know, you would have like 2 radio stations and people would listen to what's there, and there people would experience maybe symphonic music. That's not the case now. It's, I mean, you're just listening to, I mean, my sons never listen to symphonic music. They just listen to rap. So, I mean.
How does the NAC make any money right now, given that your concerts have been free?
I mean, they don't really. I mean, that's the thing, and that's the worry, is that we are going to see reduction in our revenues for sure. We are seeing, you know, this year is a catastrophic year for sure.
Well, thank you very much for that answer. And once again, thanks for giving us a diversion from our normal thoughts. Actually, I have to go soon because I have a singing lesson to go to.
Great.
Good for you. Oh, okay. Well, now I'm going to call upon Anne to say thank you, Arna, for this wonderful presentation.
Thanks so much, Madeline. Art, could you possibly start my video? On behalf of the organizations, KCOR, CMOS, and the Friends, I want to thank you deeply, Arna. This talk you've just given has really fulfilled what we thought that you would do and what we hoped would come out of this. Madeline and I have been organizing talks like this, as she said, for this is the 6th year. And we started off with very technical talks, trying to ensure that people understood the mechanics of climate change and what was actually happening in the world and the latest data and so on. And we felt that this year we really needed to get beyond the science. And then when COVID hit and we had to delay this, we thought, oh my, what's going to happen with this talk? Will we be able to adjust? Will we be able to deliver online? Will this be an opportunity or will this be a casualty, basically? Well, it's proven to be a huge opportunity. So thank you so much for that. I'm just going to say a word about CMOS because we come from a slightly different place than KCOR does. We're strictly a professional organization for Canadian meteorology and oceanography. Our membership are generally scientists and pretty hardcore scientists at that. And what I've noticed actually during this whole COVID crisis is these hardcore scientists have opened their hearts and their minds to a broader kind of aspect of society. And I think this gives us a huge opportunity in terms of a new route for scientists to reach society and to provoke change based on not only the science, but on communication with a wider, like a new renaissance almost, stepping away from the siloed regions of science into a much more emotional and fulsome, if you like, human space for dialogue and so on. So I was absolutely thrilled with what you said about the direction of the orchestra in terms of being diverse and socially relevant, musically exciting fair in the future, dialogue on the different issues, and this Nordic Bridges program to come in 2022 sounds absolutely amazing. It sounds as though like we're all going in the same direction, although from very different perspectives and points of view. So I look forward to exploring a way forward with you, with all artists. We need very much to incorporate your thoughts, directions, and feelings and emotions. There is an opportunity for a deeper dialogue based on all this, and I urge everybody who's been here today to engage in that. And I want to thank you very much, Arna, for articulating so clearly what has to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for these wise words. You know, I'm deeply touched, and you know, for all your work, you know, on the Zoom. You know, we wouldn't be here without you. We need you. You know.